This is Paul Schneiderman on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio. This is the 9th edition of the show. On this show, we're focusing on all sorts of sports and related issues. Today, in the 9th edition of Sports and Stuff, we have a very interesting guest, Mark Collins. I'm going to give a little introduction for Mark. So Mark and the listeners, I want you all to bear with me for a minute. Today, the Seattle Seahawks, established in 1976, are known as one of the most successful and popular American pro sports franchises. Many people, though, have either forgotten or do not know the story about how the Seattle Seahawks came pretty close to leaving Seattle in the 1990s. It took the efforts of Paul Allen, the current Hawks owner, various politicians, and other insiders who helped prevent the Hawks from moving to Southern California. However, there were some others involved in the fight to keep the Hawks in Seattle as well. One guy is Seattle native Mark Collins. Mark is a blue-collar fan who works as a contractor, and Mark is a super fan who helped mobilize fans and others when he founded Save Our Seahawks in the 1990s. Mark's efforts helped persuade elected officials and others to ensure the Seahawks franchise stayed in the Northwest. The King County Council recently announced a resolution recognizing the 20th anniversary of the saving of the Seattle Seahawks, and Mark Collins is specifically mentioned in the resolution. Today, we're going to learn a little bit more about Mark's background, his work with Save Our Seahawks, his charitable work with a foundation named after his late wife, the Jennifer L. Collins Memorial Foundation, and 12s Helping 12s. We're going to get Mark's thoughts on some other sports issues as well. Mark, thank you for coming on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio. I have my first question now.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Mark. Well, first of all, Mark, how did you become such a big Seahawks fan?
Well, that was back in the very first year in 1976. You know, originally, actually, my mom had season tickets the first 2 years, but she only went to like 1 or 2 games a year, and then after the third year, she decided she was going to, I don't want these anymore. And I said, no, I'll take them. So technically, I've been a season ticket holder in reality since 78, but I've been going to all the games since 76. So, yeah, I bleed blue and green.
We know you're a super fan, Mark. Okay, Mark. So in 1996, the then Seahawks owner, Ken Behring, transferred the team's operations to Anaheim, California. I want to know how Save Our Seahawks developed, and was it formed before Behring relocated the team to Southern California or after?
Well, technically, the 95 season, pretty much every other week, there was a rumor or two coming out about every 2 weeks that Ken Behring wanted to move the team to Southern California, and he kept denying it, and then come, I think it was about the 18th, 19th of December, I think the previous day we'd actually beat the Raiders in the Kingdom. I think it was on Sunday Night Football or whatever it was. But the next day I was watching 11 o'clock news, and there was another, so-called rumor that he wanted to move the team, and something snapped in my head. I sat down and started writing this letter. So he actually got the third draft along with the media and then NFL Commissioner Tagliabue. But I notified everybody that was in December of 95 that I was forming Save Our Seahawks. And it wasn't until February 2nd of 96 that Ken Behring actually decided to move the team. So I was a little prepared.
Interesting. I did not know that you formed Save Our Seahawks before Behring actually tried to move the team. Who were some other founders of Save Our Seahawks besides you, Mark?
Well, it was me. And then I approached my friend Dean Olsby, who had a restaurant bar, the Little Red Hen, up in Green Lake area, and kind of coerced him into, we put up something on the bar, and then I talked to my attorney about, trying to find a class action suit attorney. So I was a little bit prepared when everything happened. So yeah, he turned me on to Steve Berman, met with them, and they agreed to take on the case if and when not Paul, but Ken did decide to pull the plug and move, and so we were a little prepared come February 2nd.
Sure seems like it was like an antitrust type class action, right?
Yeah, well, it was. Yeah, we hit him hard right between the eyeballs. I mean, King County hit him between the eyeballs. I mean, he had a lot of legal fights up against him, and he was coming from all directions. And we were actually the first ones to file suit. We filed suit 3 days after he made his announcement. So we were a little ahead of the game, but so we did release that suit on July 1st of '97. in part of the settlement to finalize the deal with Paul Allen. So
This is Paul Schneiderman of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with Mark Collins. What was the reaction from the Seahawks organization when you founded Save Our Seahawks?
Well, initially, I mean, obviously they are all working for Ken Behring, but I did run into Gary Wright early on in the campaign. I think it was like late February or early March at an event down on Lake Union honoring now late Wayne Cody. And here's this short little man comes up to me, and I didn't know Gary Wright from anybody else, but he came up to me and said, keep doing, you didn't hear this from me, but keep doing what you're doing, so, but, they were employees of Mr. Behring, so they really couldn't, even though I had a cheering section on the background, they couldn't really interact with me at all until after Paul bought the option in April.
Mark, tell us who Gary Wright is.
Oh, Gary Wright at the time was, he was one of the main vice presidents of the Seahawks. He was one of the original with Sandy Gregory and whatnot. So yeah, he now works he's retired from the Seahawks, but still is very high up the food chain when it comes to the Sounders and everything else. But a very highly respected man, not only in our community, but also the NFL community as a whole.
That's interesting what Mr. Wright privately told you when he was employed by Behring.
Yeah, well,
So a council member...
There's no paper trail.
Gotcha. Council member Pete Von Reitbauer played a role in working out a deal to get Paul Allen to agree to buy the team from Ken Behring with a conditional option to purchase.
Right.
Did you play a role at all in that process?
Well, I think just what Save Our Seahawks group did for 3 months. I mean, we pretty much kept it in the public's eye day in, day out for from February 2nd until Paul Allen bought his option on April 20th. But I mean, that didn't end our process. But I mean, we just kept it in the public's eye. We kept it out there, which in turn helped Paul finally come to the table. But yeah, there was a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and I'm just one of those pieces. But yeah, Pete was one of those as well.
So Allen did not purchase the option until about April of '97.
April 20th of '96, he bought an option.
Okay,
which just gave us 14 months to get a stadium done. But part of his options, we had to get a new stadium done. So at that point, we didn't have a new stadium design or anything. So we went through 3 different stadium designs. What we have now currently is the third design. The first design only covered 10% of the people, and I hands down put my foot down and said that's not going to happen. Then we came up with one that covered 30% or 35%, and then eventually we came up with this one that covers 60%. So.
Interesting. Mark, looking back in this 1996-97 era, what politicians in particular did you find most supportive of Save Our Seahawks?
Well, Gary Locke was a big supporter. I mean, right out of the gate. I mean, at the time he was King County executive, so. But yeah, he was quite supportive. And then Jeannie Cole. I mean, she was phenomenal. I remember meeting her down in front of FX McCrory's, this little short woman at the time, and she was a state senator, and I think she was on the stadium task force as well. But she comes up and hands me her card and says, "I think you're going to need your help." So, I think most of the politicians supported what I did. But then again, I mean, I was a guy that really was nobody could control, and.
Not you, Mark. Come on.
Well,
I'm joking.
That's a true story. I mean, there's a lot of people in this town who could tell you how I was somebody that made a lot of people nervous. But I know how to play fair. I know how to play nice in the sandbox. Let's put it that way.
Mike Lowry, the late Mike Lowry, was governor at that time, and then Locke, I believe, took over as governor in early '97. Was Governor Lowry helpful at all?
Not in the early days. I mean, I didn't really interact with them. In Norm Mailing's office, I worked with Paula Jellison in Norm Mailing's office. Juan Cotto, another great guy. I think you know Juan.
I know Juan, very good guy.
Juan would be a good guy to come in on this thing.
He's a great guy.
Juan was Gary Locke's assistant at the time. But again, I was somebody that, in fact, Gary Locke, we had private meetings early on, and he says, "Man, we think you should do this, this, and this." But if you get in trouble, we don't know who you are. So I mean. Our goal at that time was mainly just to keep it in the public's eye. There was a lot of times we were top story on all 3 channels, or 3 main channels anyway, on the nightly news. But and that's what we had to do to keep it in the public's eye and to keep Paul's interest in which with the help of the politicians, like you said, Pete and whatnot, they finally brought him to the table. But initially, he didn't want any part of it. So
Took some persuading to Paul Allen then.
it took some persuading on part of the politicians, as well as seeing it on the news every night. So I mean, I also had conversations with some of his people as well, and they initially told me, no, we're not interested, so look elsewhere. But I think, as Pete told you, man, eventually it came down to, we looked a lot of different places, and we really didn't have a plan B. We had plan A, and that was Paul Allen, and so we were lucky that we finally brought him to the table. And I think Paul will tell you now, it's probably been one of his best investments.
No doubt, Mark, you guys were instrumental in convincing Allen to purchase the Seahawks. We may not have even had the franchise today if Allen didn't step in.
Right.
Paul Schneiderman with Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with Mark Collins. Okay, Mark, so Referendum 48 passed on June 17, 1997, I believe, a statewide initiative that authorized the building of CenturyLink Stadium, where the Hawks and Sounders play today. Can you tell us, Mark, a little bit about what role you and Save Our Seahawks played in that campaign?
Well, I was in part of that campaign throughout the whole thing. I mean, the group Save Our Seahawks was kind of small. We had Bev Hopley and Rod Long was part of that. But we went around and registered people to vote. We went around and we tried to create some synergy, get some, the fan base had been diminished at that point in time. So we were out hitting sports bars and whatnot, and the Mariners were very supportive, but they let us come down there and campaign in front there, and actually gave my volunteers tickets to the Mariner games. So it's just getting out there in the community. I found out that a lot of sports fans were not even registered voters, so that was a big part of what we did, was just getting out there, beating the pavement. It's like any other campaign. And campaigns are based on confusion. So you had people, like Chris Van Dyke and whatnot, and the Citizens for More Important Things, that were out trying to confuse people. And to this day, there's still people that are confused and think that they're paying for those stadiums when they're really not. In fact, I had a gentleman a couple of days ago get me on Facebook, and the guy lives in California, and he's chomping at the bit about, I thought we voted down all that stuff. I said, well, you didn't vote down anything. Anyway, that's all. Don't get me started about stadiums.
Mark, it's really interesting how close that 97 vote was. A lot of people look back and believe that the pitch to soccer fans that there would be an MLS franchise at that stadium one day is probably what put it over the top. Do you buy that analysis?
I think that had a lot to do with it. Yeah. I mean, we had to reach out to, to anybody and everybody, but I mean, how valuable sports are to our community in a lot of different ways that people just don't really realize, and what they bring back, what players do to give back to the community. I mean, even look at like what Russell Wilson does every Tuesday. He's out there, visiting kids, and we all do that. Even our organizations, the fan base, our 12s, Open 12s, we're out trying to raise money and give back to the community. But there's a lot of new money that's brought into this town just because of these sports, that even the naysayers, benefit from that. So
I'm going to ask you some more questions in a minute, Mark, about some of the charitable events that you're involved in. Now, Mark, I believe that you personally accumulated some financial debt as a result of your work on behalf of Save Our Seahawks. My first question is, despite the debt, was it worth it? And were you able to get that cleared out?
Well, I still have a mortgage on my house, but yeah, prior to Save Our Seahawks, my house was paid for. But because Save Our Seahawks was a full-time job, and I really wasn't working, bringing in any income, and I'm running around the state on my own dime, I ran up a debt, of over $100,000.
Wow.
And that's back in, late 90s. That was a lot of money. I mean, even today's day, that's a lot of money. But so, yeah, I ended up having to mortgage my house after the fact to pay off the debt that I'd raised, run up doing Save Our Seahawks.
Did you get any help from people to help you pay that off?
No. Yeah.
Wow. No. You really put your money where your mouth was, Mark.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if you add up the $100,000 and the interest on top of it, I don't know what it cost me, but,
wow.
I created a lot of new friends, whether it be Mama Blue or or you name it. There's a lot of people in this town and Jeannie Cole and Pete Von Reichmeyer. I mean, all these people, whether it be the guy on the street or the politicians and Gary Locke. I mean, I consider these people friends that I wouldn't have if I hadn't done that. Despite
the debt, it was worth it.
I would have probably done things differently, but in hindsight, it's all worth it. They're still the Seattle Seahawks, so what are you going to say? You can't say No, it's
That's a fair answer when I ask the follow-up question.
Yeah, don't put me on the spot, Paul.
Gotcha, Mark. This is Paul Schneiderman, Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with Mark Collins. Mark, I believe the Seahawks at one time promised you lifelong season tickets, but apparently the franchise did not follow through on that promise. Can you share with us about that?
God, you got to bring that one up. Okay, here's the true story. Election night, I was told by Bud Coffey, and that they would have lost the election without me. And at the time, I just I don't buy all that, but they said they would have lost the election, and I was said you will never have to buy another ticket again the rest of your life. A week later, that turned into tickets for 6 years, which was mainly the Husky Stadium years, and then the first year in the new stadium. So, but that's all I got. I got that in a leather coat. There's more to the story, but I think we'll just leave it at that.
Does it frustrate you that the franchise didn't follow through on that?
I don't know. Next question.
Okay, I'll move on, Mark. Fair enough. Hey, I asked questions.
Come on. You trying to stir up dirt or what?
No, Mark, I'm asking questions. I looked at a couple of other interviews as well. So, Mark, what is your relationship now like with the Hawks franchise?
I think I have a great relationship with them. I deal with Mike Flood and Chuck Arnold, who is now COO. And when I first met Chuck, I actually met him before even Paul got involved. We were down in L.A. picketing out in front of where the Seahawks were practicing down in L.A. And this guy, drives out. He stops and he says, he said, "I'm going to the store. You want anything?" I said, "Yeah, bring me back a mocha or frappuccino or something." He looks at me. He says, "They don't have those down here yet." So apparently Starbucks hadn't got to L.A. by that time. But yeah, at that time he was an intern and now he's COO. So I still deal with Chuck and Mike Flood, who I think Mike Flood's initial job when he came out in the campaign was to try to control me. But if you brought him and asked him, he'll tell you I was a handful and still so. But
Mark,
I have a good heart.
You are who you are, Mark. You're definitely a strong personality.
I don't know how to sugarcoat very well.
Mark, I mentioned at the beginning, and you brought up that you are involved in some charitable and philanthropic work, and I know your late wife, Jenny Collins, sadly passed from cancer complications in 2006. Can you share with us a little bit about the charitable work that you do now?
Well, I've always, wanted to give back to the community, and if I could make a living with my philanthropy work and whatnot, that's where I get my most joy in life. But yeah, shortly after Jenny passed away, I started the Jen Collins Foundation, where we help, with patient assistance programs when it comes, for cancer patients. That is now kind of formed now and transformed and morphed into what we call now 12s Helping 12s.
That's great.
That I do with my friend Norb. He'd be another good person to bring on here. I think his dad comes on some of your shows. But anyway, we go out and, again, we try to help out, with the little things and anything we can with the smaller things in life that a lot of people forget that are very so important. In fact, we have our holiday grants coming up this next month. Where we give out. Last year we were able to give out 12 $250 grants to people with that couldn't normally get Christmas presents or whatnot, or holiday presents for their kids and maybe a holiday meal. And we do that, and then we also adopt several families from Swedish Hospital Cancer Institute.
That's great.
To help with their food. We try to give back to the community any way we can.
Do you have a website address you can throw out for your charitable work?
Actually, the main thing is reality is we're all on Facebook. We try to keep our overheads costs down. So, if you want to look up 12s Helping 12s on Facebook or the Jen Collins Foundation on Facebook, that's the cheapest way for us to keep our overhead down.
Totally understand. Mark, do you believe that Save Our Seahawks has inspired any other fan groups around the country who are trying to save other sports franchises?
Well, I know there was a lot that tried to stop moves prior to that, to us. And then more recently, even here, we've had a group, with Save Our Sonics, that tried to do the same thing. Unfortunately, we're the only fan group that has ever been successful at doing so. I know Brian and the rest are trying to get a franchise back here with the basketball team. That's a whole nother subject that we could probably spend another hour or more talking about. But
sure,
and we probably don't have time to go into that. But but yeah, there's been others around the country and even here in Seattle.
Full disclosure, I was a legal advisor to Save Our Sonics, and I know that the Save Our Seahawks effort was obviously a lot more successful in terms of keeping the franchise. That's for sure. Mark, I guess there was some talk at some point that there may be a documentary or film about your work with Save Our Seahawks. What's happening on that front, Mark?
There's a documentary that's being produced right now by Norb Kawili, and then it's in the final stages right now. It's probably going to be released here in the next month or so.
That's great.
And it goes into, well, it starts out about Save Our Seahawks, and actually goes into how I lost my wife, and then how I took her coat to the Super Bowl. That was a huge thing for me to get her coat back to Super Bowl 48. And actually, I was presented a ticket on the 40-yard line by Debbie Maycomer, and it was very overwhelming. That was an overwhelming trip.
I remember that. That was a national story when you went to the New York Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, bypass rich and straight to famous.
that was. I remember watching you on one of the cable TV shows, and we were all proud of you, Mark, for your work. And it was nice to see Save Our Seahawks recognized many years later as well.
Right.
How was that? How was that trip to New York in 2014?
Physically, mentally, and emotionally overwhelming. So yeah, I mean, going back there, I had no idea what was going to happen, obviously, but. Like I said, the morning of the game, I was taken into Fox Studios, and not knowing I was going to go on live TV, but they put me on live Fox Radio at their time was 6:30 in the morning, so technically 3:30 in the morning for me, and was presented that ticket on the 40-yard line. So, but I never sat down the whole game, and looking up, and I think Jenny was with me the whole time. So.
Special tribute.
Yeah, I wish we had more time to talk about Jenny and that whole trip, but yeah.
Absolutely emotional trip here. Did you make the Arizona Super Bowl in 2015?
Yes, I did, and I pissed off Alex Rodriguez.
How did you piss off? How did you upset A-Rod?
Well, because A-Rod sat in front of me at the game, and I warned him before. I said, "I hope you got earplugs." He's all, "Bring it." I said, "Okay," but I have a whistle. In the old Kingdom days, I was able to clear out 2 or 3 rows, but yeah, in the middle of the fourth quarter, Alex turns around and says, "Man, you're the loudest human being I've ever heard in my life." So, I maybe didn't piss him off, but yeah, he was definitely covering his ears a lot.
This is Paul Schneiderman of Rainier Avenue Radio on Sports and Stuff with Mark Collins. Mark, do you have any thoughts on what's going on in the NFL right now? There's a big controversy surrounding the national anthem and players protesting. Any thoughts on this whole issue with the NFL? Because ratings are down.
I mean, we definitely. I mean, that's a whole other subject in itself. But yeah, we definitely have social and racial issues and inequalities in our society, and now I mean, even bringing up with the females and everything else, and so I totally understand what Michael Bennett and everybody is trying to accomplish and create. They're trying to create awareness about an issue. I just think that in some cases, their message may be getting lost in the method. Does that make sense?
It's a point of view a lot of people have.
I mean, I totally agree with what they're doing, and I totally agree there's a problem. And I just wish maybe there was a better way to get that message out there and create awareness about it. I mean, we definitely got to solve these racial and social inequalities, I think.
Do you see any long-term damage to the NFL? Because it seems like right now you have pro-Trump people, pro-Kaepernick people. It seems like everyone's upset the NFL right now. Do you see the NFL recovering from this?
Well, I think our country is more divided than I've ever seen it in my lifetime, and I'm no spring chicken, So I think you're seeing that in the sports thing. I think, I mean, you could get in my opinion about professional sports in a whole, and I mean, to be honest, I think professional sports in a whole has forgot what got them there, and that's a blue collar fan.
No question.
And that's unfortunate. But I mean, I think they're aware of it. I do have some talks coming up with some of the higher up the food chains out at Seahawks, and we don't want to lose sight of what got them there, and that is the blue collar fan. But it is a business, so I mean, you got to look at both sides of things. So, but I think the fact that I was a voice for the fans back 20 years ago, hopefully I can still be that voice for them and try to find a middle ground that works for everybody.
Would you like to see the Seahawks maybe allocate some more seats that are more affordable for the average fan? Is that a solution?
I would love to see that. I know that was an issue with Bob Whitsitt and I early on, and when I first met Bob, that the family of four can't really afford to go to a game. But I mean, you gotta figure out a way to target the youth nowadays, and they're with their phones and iPhones and things like that. I mean, I think so. I think a lot of kids aren't going to games like that. They don't care as much anymore. It's how you market it. It's like anything else in life. You build it up. Marketing is nothing more than building it up bigger than life and hoping like hell you can back up your BS.
Mark, you break it down.
Okay, well,
do you think, Mark, the concussion issue is going to hurt the NFL long term at all?
I think it's not going to help. I think again, it's another issue that has to be. You got to create awareness of. At the same time, football is a violent sport and always has been. And granted, everybody's trying to make it safer. I'm not think they're trying to do harm to people. After last night's game and losing, Sherman and whatnot, I think there's a lot of people that think Thursday night football needs to go by the wayside. So,
well, Mark, we're wrapping up here. It's been fun to get your thoughts on all sorts of issues. What does the future hold for Mark Collins?
I'm just going to want to continue to, help people out. As best I can. A lot of people say I should run for city council. There's a couple people on that council I'd like to get off there.
It'd be an entertaining race if you did run.
Yeah, it would be. Well, yeah, it would be very comical. Here's Councilman Collins in his flip flops coming to work every day. So
it'd be fun. Well, Mark, it's been a lot of fun to have you on. I wanted to make sure that the Save Our Seahawks story was shared in this 20th anniversary.
Appreciate that.
It's just been a pleasure, and you and I will, of course, be in touch.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Mark.
Right on.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.